everyone, my name is Emily Sledge, and today I'm going to be talking about my unit plan. So for my unit plan, I used The Girl Who Never Made Mistakes as my foundation. My goal in using this book was to promote a growth mindset and to also introduce the idea to my students that mistakes are okay, because we all make mistakes. The curriculum that I used or implemented in my lesson plans was the Literacy and Learning in Content Areas book. It can be found on ProQuest through the Molloy Library if anyone's interested. It's the 3rd edition. The case study that I chose was Colby, so he is student J or curriculum J. The lesson plan that I wrote fully is number 3 of 6 in case anyone's interested. And as I said before, the goal of my lesson really was to introduce the idea of a growth mindset and get my students thinking, well, do I have a growth mindset? How can I have a growth mindset? What characteristics make up someone who has a growth mindset? And that being said, the literacy skill that I chose to implement into my lesson was character traits, or deciphering character traits. I felt that using the book was a great head start for students because Beatrice is such a complex character, and she does change throughout the book, which teaches children or students that people do change and that your mindset can change. So all in all, I wanted to encompass that growth mindset throughout my unit, throughout the 6 days that I wrote the lessons for. So just a brief synopsis of the first 2 lessons. My first lesson is really just a motivational exercise to get the students engaged. And then the second lesson is a full read aloud of the book with engaging questions, but it doesn't go too in depth. The 3rd day is the day that I chose to write the full lesson plan for. That's really where we get started in our investigation of what character traits mean, and I will share my developmental procedures with you. That way, if you ever do want to implement this in your classroom, you have an idea of how to do it. So, keeping Colby in mind throughout this, Colby is a good student, but he has trouble focusing, and he does get easily distracted. He becomes very frustrated when he doesn't understand what's going on in the classroom, and he tends to have these fits. And he doesn't seem to come out of them until he has some sort of movement break. So I tried to keep this in mind with my lesson. So what I decided to do was to create a stations day. So day 1 and 2 are just a read aloud and introduction. Day 3, 4, and 5 are station days. So this lesson does encompass stations, but I will explain each of them further. So to start the day, to motivate my students, I started with I can statements, just to say as a group and chant. Gets the students, a sense of community, and it gives them motivation to try in the lesson. So the I can statements that I provided for my children are, they are I can, we can statements for today. It says, I can identify a character trait within a character. I can recognize a character trait based on the words or the illustrations of the story. So this is really important because we can take keywords, obviously, to help us find or decipher a character trait, but you can also use the illustrations in a book to help as well. And then I can be positive and helpful when working in a group. That's also important too, that collaborative work. We want to make sure that we're working as a team and not one student is, taking over or isn't participating, so everyone again feels like a part of the community. So I figured that I would print, so I'm sorry if you can't see that well, but I'll hold it up to the camera. But as a part of the developmental procedures and the motivation, I would have the students either sit at their desks or sit on the carpet, and I would model how to find a character trait within a text. So I would provide my students with 2 examples. I printed 1 for today, but I have 2. And I would read the paragraph aloud, and then I would, with the students, underline the keywords that would tell me what Tyler, for example's character trait is. So I would say, okay, my readers, let's have listening ears, quiet hands, and quiet mouths as I read and I demonstrate how to decipher a character trait. This, of course, would follow me saying, has anyone ever heard of a character trait before? Do we all have character traits? What's a trait? And so on and so forth. So, for example, I would read, Tyler always seems to have a smile on his face. Nothing seems to get him down. When the baseball game that he's been looking forward to got canceled because of rain, Tyler said it would give him a chance to catch up on his reading. Which character trait best describes Tyler? So we would look back in the paragraph and we would say, oh, well, he has a smile on his face, nothing gets him down. It would give him a chance to do something else. And then the students would help me choose the answer of cheerful, because obviously he's not negative and he doesn't seem to be very silly. So this would be handed to the students, and this would also be put on the smartboard. That way students who need more of a visual aid have the smartboard to look at as well, and vice versa. Then they would do one about Ellie, but I figured I would just print one for time's sake. And then, to clarify before breaking into stations, the teacher would bring, or I would bring out this anchor chart. I also printed this. It demonstrates character traits that are both inside and outside. So when we are talking about outside traits, we mean our physical traits. Like I have blue eyes, I have brown hair. We would talk about the different physical traits that the children have in the room. Then we would talk about inside traits, and I would ask them, what do you think an inside trait means? What does that mean? And they would say, you know, a personality, way we behave, so on and so forth. And then I would provide some examples of both physical and personality traits for them to go off of as they break into their stations. So for their stations, I have a guided reading station, which would be with me, where I would take my lowest students first. And then there are 4 other stations. So we have a vocabulary character trait matching station. So I only printed 2, but we have these character trait cards. We have the term and we have the definition. And these would be cut and laminated, and then they would be spread face down all over a group of students' desks. So for example, we have kind. So the students could either work together independently, whatever they're more comfortable with, but I would encourage collaboratively. The student would find the word kind, and they would have to find in the scramble the definition, which would be wanting or liking to do good things for people. So I have about 20 vocabulary words that the students would have to sort and match and line up together. Another station I have is a visual to scenario station. So students, kind of like the character trait vocabulary card station, would have to take scenarios of different character traits, and then they would have to match them to the picture on the other card. These would be cut and laminated as well, and they would be spread face down all over a desk. In each station, I included 20 vocabulary words because I felt that if we kept reiterating the same terms, it would help build the students' knowledge of those particular traits. Oh, and also all of the stations do provide a word bank, just so that the students have a way of gauging what words they've completed so far and which ones they haven't. So for example, Eddie practices running every day. He came in first place at his race on Saturday. So they would have to match to this card. There's Eddie, and the term would be athletic. So his character trait would be athletic. Jackie gives a lot of his money to help people in need. And then the word would be generous, and they would have to match it to the picture of someone being generous. And there, of course, would be answer keys that they could reference once they're done with the activity. Okay, the next station would be a kinesthetic tactile station. I really created this one with Colby in mind because I know that frequent movement breaks help keep his engagement, and when he's working with things that he's interested in and hands-on, he's more likely to complete the task. So what I would do is I would place 2 hula hoops on the floor, and I would put 1 hula hoop for growth mindset characteristics, and then I would put a hula hoop for fixed mindset characteristics, and the students would take the same vocabulary cards that they had from the other stations using the same words, and they would have to sort them into what they would think would be someone's characteristics who have a positive growth mindset and those who have a fixed mindset. Then they would receive a worksheet with a brain, which sounds silly, but it would be called Beatrice's brain, and they could color however they'd like. And then choosing 3 characteristics, they would label different parts of the brain that would be, you know, optimistic, enthusiastic, determined. And then they would hand that in, or they would keep that in their stations folder. The next station would be an inside-outside station, which would reiterate the skills that we talked about with this anchor chart. So the students would receive a template where they could draw a picture of themselves, and on the bottom, they could list 3 physical characteristics they have and 3 personality traits that they have, or characteristics. Students on a lower level can just list the words, but higher level students could write sentences, and they would be provided with sentence starters if needed. Then for the final station, we would have a guided reading station, and that's where I would work with the students on honing in on the different parts of the story and the different characteristics that Beatrice displays as she continues to change. So I figured I would talk about my lowest level of students and what modifications I made for them. But I do have 3 different levels of worksheets and differentiation within my lesson plan. So to start off, I would read the beginning of the book again with my students. Reading the story twice, it just helps them reabsorb the parts of the story that they need to know, and also just reiterates the different character traits that we're going to be digging for. And within their guided reading station, I would probe them with questions about how they feel about Beatrice in the beginning of the story. Why is she called the girl who never makes mistakes? Do you think her being called the girl that never makes mistakes has put pressure on her and has made her have more of a fearful or fixed mindset? What character traits does she possess? Does she seem happier than her brother, more sad than her brother, and etc.? So then they would complete this worksheet. It would be called Beatrice in the Beginning. So the directions say, in each solid square, I would like you to write 1 character trait Beatrice has in the beginning of the story. The trait you choose can be physical or a personality trait. Describe where in the book you saw this, and then they would list either the trait or the sentence that they believe solidifies that that's the trait that she possesses. Whatever they choose, whatever their comfort level is, whatever their writing and reading level is, that's what they would put in here. Then students, keeping Colby in mind, students do have the option of illustrating the part of the book that that character trait is apparent. So that's pretty much my lesson. Like I said, the stations would continue for 3 days. That way that I made sure that I met with all my students, but continued to meet with my lower students every day. The 6th station would be a Flipgrid assignment, kind of like a celebration of them working hard and learning about character traits and really solidifying their knowledge. So we would watch a America's Got Talent clip of a child that won a golden buzzer, and then we would talk about, well, what if Beatrice didn't mess up at the talent show? Would she still have had a growth mindset eventually? Would she not have learned that mistakes are okay? And then we talk about what feedback we would have given her as a judge at the talent show after she messed up. So the students will make a Flipgrid video, and then they have the option of throwing gold confetti in the air and giving her a golden buzzer, using at least 3 character traits that they think she possessed that made her have a growth mindset. So basically, that's my lesson. The modifications that I made, I used visual aids with Colby. I find that his love of drawing and illustration, he's a visual learner. I used the kinesthetic tactile aspect of the stations, the movement, the hands-on work. I provided him with sentence starters when he was frustrated. There is a KWL chart within the unit, and drawn response. I also implemented some Project Zero thinking routines throughout the unit, and I also used the station learning. So from the curriculum, the research encourages the use of sentence starters, of graphic organizers such as the KWL, and the kinesthetic tactile learning, because when you're using visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic learning, you're fully immersed in what you're doing. So I tried to provide that opportunity for Colby and all my students as much as possible. But that's about it. Thank you.